You have challenged a question about appropriate credit, and you discussed the thing that's about alternative, but there is sometimes, even alternative and appropriate credit is not a solution. So I have a question for Dominique and for Edgar. There is a recession in most of the European countries. There is also austerity measures, so poor people and even middle-class people are in a huge financial pressure, and most of them, especially in the UK and Ireland, all that, but it's true all over Europe, are turning to credit to find solution. For most of them, it's not the solution. How do you handle that as two type of responsible, in a kind of way, financial service provider?
Let's take the first question first from obviously the first question first, from Georges, which was directed particularly to Dominique and Edgar, and it was about the changing financial situation in Europe, the recession, and the hardship that people are facing, and how people more and more are turning to credit for solutions. They're also being denied access to credit in many places as well, and so turning to often to some of the guys that Mick speaks about, and how in that situation when people are looking for more credit to get through these difficult times, what's the response, what should be the response of a responsible lender to people in that situation? Who wants to go first? Dominique?
C'est pas une réponse, il n'y a pas de réponse.
Well, there's no easy response to this, unfortunately. It's a bit of a trick question from Georges, I think. We haven't taken any specific measures to deal with this in the context of the crisis. But we can see that things are perhaps developing. This is what I feel anyway. Practices are developing. You can see this in the microcredit area. This can be an alibi for some establishments not to budge with their classic loans. But I think that things are moving and people are rethinking things to change the approach to credit. And there's a cultural element as well in the banking world. Even in the Banque Postale, my colleagues who are responsible for credit, well, I always have to fight with them to convey this message that it's important to keep an eye on certain practices. But I think that there are political initiatives which are in preparation as well, which might allow us to go further. That's really all I can say for the time being, but perhaps in a few weeks' time, I might have something more to say about this.
I'll ask Edgar, then I will ask other members of the panel, and then if there's anybody in the Assembly generally who'd like to comment, I'll ask Edgar, then members of the panel, and then if there's anybody generally here who would like to comment on this question too, I'll come back to you all. So Edgar.
Okay. First, our approach in our association is a little bit different because we are a non-profit association, so we should have a different approach than a commercial. Although we should do our business, but for us it's a little bit easier to understand people problems. We are interface credit. We do interface credit between banks and people to business only, and when we do that, we only face problems that of people that that want to start a new business because they are unemployed or they don't have because they are unemployed and they don't have enough income. How can we be responsible doing that? It's our politic is the proximity with people. We do several interviews. We go to their houses to see how they manage, we speak with the people around them, and we ask for their responsibilities with banks and other things, and we analyze each one situation and decide, are we facing, are we solving a problem or creating a problem? And with these analyses, of course, sometimes we have mistakes. We try to understand if we can really help. We have also a commission of people that analyzes the projects. They are independent volunteers, and when they don't feel confident with the project and its capacity to generate income to fulfill, to repay the loan, they don't authorize to propose to the banks. So we don't charge different rates. We have very low rates. That's why I was surprised. We can charge Euribor +2 or +3 a year. So it's a very low income. And why can we do it? Because we are subsidized for getting people back to work, to the unemployment institution. But we don't have different rates between the risks. So we only analyze the situation of the people. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Edgar. Is anybody else on the panel would like to have a contribute? Yes.
Yeah, I think it was a very interesting question from George there. I think you've probably highlighted the most important issue I think facing policymakers at the moment, but yet most of the policymakers are actually ignoring what's happening. This is the problem, isn't it? Because we're now in the third phase of the financial crisis. We started off with the crisis in the financial markets, that turned into an economic crisis, that is the recession, and now we're seeing the social policy crisis, where many people are being excluded, and many people are going to face a decade of stagnating incomes or possibly even falling incomes as a result of the austerity measures. But I have not seen any response from policymakers on how we can deal with the third phase of the financial crisis. Now, the question then becomes, well, what can we do about people who do need access to credit or who are financially stretched because of their squeezed incomes? My answer to that is you do not help them by extending access to credit they can't afford to repay. So I don't think any bank would be behaving responsibly if they extended access to credit, knowing that there was a high risk that financially vulnerable household could not afford to repay that credit, or the extension of credit actually really squeezed the household finances even more. But having said that, that doesn't mean there aren't things that the banks can do. And I think one thing I'm really interested in is this issue of support for vulnerable households, because even if extending credit is not the right answer, there is a lot more that can be done and needs to be done to help those households manage their finances better, either by maximising their income. For example, in the UK, there are so many households in the UK who don't even take up their benefits, that they're actually in the welfare entitlements. They don't take them up. So they're actually missing out on a valuable source of income. We also know that, as I say in the UK, that the poor pay more. If you're on a lower income, you're more likely to pay higher for your utility bills and other basic utilities. So therefore, there's a lot that can be done to actually reduce expenditure for those households as well. Now, the way you do that, I'm afraid, is not through financial education, because there is very limited evidence that financial education has any impact on the behaviour of households. What does work is actually direct support by trusted intermediaries like debt advice charities and so on, and some of the support networks that Dominique has mentioned. So I think the banks can help really in that field by supporting debt advice charities and so on to intervene to help people manage their finances better. But I think, I think there's other things that can be done as well. one of the things that isn't happening at a European Commission level or at a national level is that there has not been sufficient impact assessments undertaken to understand in detail what the impact of the capital requirements directives will have on different households. So again, we don't understand enough how the banks are responding to the tougher prudential regulation requirements. I think that's one thing we can do as well. But the last thing I would say is really, that the governments really do need to step in and require banks to disclose and become more transparent about their lending. Because one of the problems is that we don't know where the problems are. We know there's a big problem, but we don't know who are the good performers or who are the bad performers. And unless we get some kind of equivalent to the transparency measures in the American Community Reinvestment Act, then we're not going to make much progress.